Thrilled to be here in this historic building in a central location in downtown Rochester. We're actually still a pretty new space. We're coming up on our third anniversary here at this location. But it's important to note that I don't think this space would exist at all if it weren't for people like Luvon Sheppard. Most of you know that Luvon graduated from RIT and began teaching at RIT in the 1970s, remembering what the downtown campus was like and the transition from downtown to the Henrietta campus. But the transition didn't happen all at once. There were pieces of RIT remaining in downtown as late as the 1990s. And one of the last pieces of RIT's downtown campus was located at 50 West Main Street. A lot of people called it City Center. And in that building was the School of Arts graduate painting studios and a gallery that was open to the public. Well, when the call came from RIT that it was time to sell the building and that the School of Art graduate painting studios and the gallery would have to move to the Henrietta campus, it was Luvon Sheppard who received that call because he was head of the School of Art at the time. So he and other faculty, including Glenn Hintz and Tom Lightfoot and Zerby Sodervik and others, banded together because they were afraid that the connection between RIT and downtown Rochester would be lost. They thought that we should at least have a gallery space in downtown that was free and open to the public, that invited RIT's creative community to be part of the Rochester community. And so the first iteration of this space was called Gallery R, and it opened on Park Avenue in 1999. It stayed there for about 10 years or so, and then it moved over closer to Memorial Art Gallery in Village Gate, stayed there for a few more years, and then moved here to this location in 2018, rebranded as RIT City Art Space. And of course, many people were involved in all of those iterations of the gallery spaces in downtown, but for 20 years now, we've at least had a gallery space in Rochester somewhere. But if it hadn't been for that early advocacy and support from the School of Art faculty and Luvon Sheppard, I don't think we'd be sitting here tonight. And so that makes it even more pleasurable to host an exhibition of Luvon Sheppard's work in this space and to have him here tonight with us. Luvon is entering his 50th year of teaching at RIT, and most of you in this room, I would imagine, have memories and stories of Luvon as a teacher, an artist, and a community collaborator. Even without RIT, I think Sheppard would still be involved in the arts community in Rochester. While working for the Memorial Art Gallery in his early career, Sheppard started the All of Us Art Workshop, where people from all walks of life gathered in a creative space together. And he believed, and still believes, that all kinds of barriers, whether they're economic, racial, or generational, can be broken down with mutual access to creative space. Sheppard continues that tradition today at his own Joy Gallery and Studio, which is also just right down the street on West Main. Luvon and his wife Frances convene with students, fellow artists, and friends every Saturday for watercolor instruction, collaborative projects, or just to visit and connect with Sheppard's mentorship. Joy Gallery has hosted exhibitions by many RIT students and artists from the wider community. But I just want to make sure to point out, and there's more info about it in this kind of front corner here on a plaque about Joy Gallery, that during the run of this exhibition, which goes through December 19th, Luvon invites you to come by Joy Gallery, where more of his work is currently on display. So Luvon's influence as an educator and a community collaborator can't be overstated. But tonight we're going to focus on Luvon Sheppard, the artist. This exhibition, we wanted to focus on two main threads in Luvon's work because there was no way we can include everything. The first thing, which will come as no surprise, is Luvon's mastery and love of watercolor. Whether it's the large format watercolor paintings that often have layers of historic and symbolic meaning, or the plein air landscapes, which are painted outside from direct observation. We'll talk about those. The other thread in Sheppard's work is his relentless experimentation. embracing spontaneity and chance, which I think you can see in some of the sculptural works, but also in some more of these recent collage pieces. In the collages, Sheppard tears up and cuts up old watercolor paintings and layers them with other found and handmade materials and images, including photographs of himself. And so in these collages, Sheppard's really remixing a lifetime of recurring ideas and imagery, and you'll see that when you look close. And so what I hope comes across in the show, and what I think is most important, is that after 5 decades of teaching and more decades as an artist, Sheppard could easily rest on his laurels in previous work, but he doesn't do that. He continually reinvents his work, and he continues to inspire everyone around him. And it's been such an honor to work with Luvon putting this show together, along with Nick Delgado, who I want to make sure to thank, and many others. And it's such a pleasure to have him here with us tonight. So please help me welcome our guest, Luvon Sheppard. Luvon, thanks for being with us tonight for a little while.
And thank you. Thank all of you for taking time out to come and sit and listen to what we have to talk about. And just to come out on a Friday night like this. As you get older, it's harder and harder to do those kinds of things, you know. And then the younger ones, you know, you got better things to do. So we just appreciate you. And this is truly all of us all over again. Okay? You know, I inspire people, you know, but also people inspire me. And you know, for 81 years now, 81 years now, I have had the opportunity to just enjoy my community, the people in my community, you know, and I stand on a lot of shoulders, a lot of great people, you know, from my grade school art teacher to my high school art teacher, you know, the late Rena McKinley Stagwell, of whom my late daughter was named after. And they instilled so much in me. And Harris K. Pryor, the director of the Memorial Art Gallery, he was not only the director of the Memorial Art Gallery, but he was my friend. Elizabeth Hurdle, curator at the Memorial Art Gallery. So many people. You know, Stan Whitmire, who helped me to get an early out from the Army to come back to art school, you know, and be on the board of directors at all of us for many years. People like Roz Goldman, you know, who was head of the Women's Council. She was just a girl, took on that responsibilities and really had my back at many different intervals in my career. You know, but many of you, friends, Steve Hill, you know, Paulette Davis, you know, Jim Dennis that you're seeing sitting here, our photographer. You know, I can go on and on and on. You know, Richmond, you know, you rode back and forth to Geneseo with me. My mother was worried, my wife was worried. Sorry about that, Francis. my wife was worried because I was traveling 30 miles back and forth, you know, from Geneseo teaching watercolor. And Richmond was one of those people who would go with me for nothing, you know, and just to hang and support me, and you know, and be there with me and the students, but all of these things are very wonderful, and I feel like I'm really blessed, you know, by many of you. So thank you for coming out and supporting me. John. Okay, but I'll stop. We can go on and on and on, you know.
Do a roll call. understand RIT has you teaching every day of the week this semester. And you think after 50 years they give you a break. I hope you at least let class out early today.
Well, I did, don't tell them. But yeah, I teach 5 days a week from 8 until 10:50. Okay, except on Friday, from 8 to almost 2 o'clock. So to me, that's almost being partly retired. Not a real job. Plus I enjoy what I do. I enjoy the students, and they seem to enjoy me. You know, even though they skip class quite a bit sometimes. We have a lot of fun.
So, of all the things we could talk about, I thought we'd just start with the art and go from there, and especially starting with watercolor. So I wondered if you would just talk about the watercolor medium. What drew you to it to begin with, and why do you what keeps you passionate about watercolor?
Well, I didn't start with watercolor. I was a printmaker. Okay, I'm more of a draftsman, I guess, than a painter. At least I started that way. But when I started All of Us, we used to run a series of classes. No one wanted to teach watercolor because it was so elusive. And so since I was the executive director or whatever, or the director, you know, I had to take on the responsibility of doing that because I felt that watercolor was very important. And the first class that I ran, the only people that came were people that were elderly people, you know, and never any really young people. And so I felt the responsibility to really try to do a decent job at it. And when I first started, because I had won a few awards, you know, at different shows in the area of watercolor, I thought I could just take it on and do it without too much of a problem. But as I began to study it, I realized that I didn't know that much about watercolor, you know? And I started researching it, and the more I researched it, the more I found out that I knew less than what I thought I knew. So it just got into this here dog chasing his tail out sort of a thing. So I just had to keep going after it, and the more I learned, the more I learned, the more I learned, the more I realized I didn't know, and so here I am, you know. But watercolor, to me, has introduced me into the other mediums. I used to love oil painting because I could cover over my mistakes. But with watercolor, you have to accept the mistakes. You have to figure out something to do with those mistakes. And so over the years, I found that watercolor, process-wise, is very similar. It can be very similar to oil painting. And it's probably one of the oldest mediums that's ever existed. You know, like egg temper is really a water-based medium. And that was around before oil painting. Okay? And some watercolors has existed long before oil paintings had. And so the more I research and get into this thing, the more it expands and opens itself up to me.
So thinking about watercolor, there's two sort of ways that watercolor is represented in the show. One are the plein air landscapes, which is something that you've done most of your life and you continue to do over and over and over again, sometimes the same scene multiple times. By yourself, with friends, as an educational tool for students, but also yourself, you've talked about. Talk about that process of painting in direct observation of what you're looking at.
Well, one of the reasons that I paint the same scene over and over again, because that Steve Neal guy just keep driving back to Canadice Lake. I keep trying to tell him about other things, but he zeroes it on. We both enjoy that Canadice Lake. And once we started painting there, each time we go there to paint, we see something we didn't see before. And there's a couple of things that goes on there with Steve. We started doing plein air back before we knew what plein air was.
Luvon, hold your mic a little closer.
Okay, we started painting with plein air, painting plein air paintings way before we understood the term plein air. That term did not exist, okay, when we first started back in the early 70s. And we would go out to High Falls and just paint because we loved that scene. And I would go out with a group of people, and sometimes it would start to rain, and half of the class left after that one class that we got caught in the rain, because I said, hey, this is exciting. Those raindrops are really creating something interesting. And so a lot of the class bought into it, but some of the class didn't like that idea. So they didn't show up anymore. But Steve was one of those people that stuck. And there were many other people who came also who stuck it out over a period of time. But we traveled all over the Monroe County area, painting different locations during that period of time. But going out to Canadice Lake reminded us of the fact that, you know, if you go out early in the morning, there's a different look about the place. If you go out in the middle of the day, it looks different. If you go out there at night, it looks different still. And even the days look, one day to the other, the scene looks different there. But also, the spring looks different than the summer, and the summer looks different than the fall. And of course, in the winter, everything freezes over, so with watercolor, you can't do anything. Okay, so we don't do anything in the winter, except take photographs, you know. But we enjoy that time of conversing with each other and talking about ideas and just getting to get reacquainted with the medium of watercolor. And someone said to me the other day that they came to see the show, and the paintings that they liked the best was the one that was least finished. And my wife has been telling me for a long time, Luvon, you're overworking that painting, or you need to stop now. And I think Steve had mentioned that to me too. But yeah, there's a time when there's an essence, there's a sensibility, there's a feeling that comes through the work, and you know that you can do more to it, but there's something there that says that this is enough. You know, this is the feel of it. This is what this day has today, and tomorrow's going to be lost. You know, so we got caught up on that and on the essence of what the day will give us in relationship to the medium of watercolor. That makes sense.
Yeah. And just to touch a little bit on the large format watercolor works, which often have layers going on. To take one in particular, there's one around the corner here called Charity, and it's got a lot of different watercolor techniques in it, but there's several layers of information going on, including a portrait of your mom in the center. We talk about that painting a little bit, or just talk about how you build up these layers and why those layers are important to you in these large format pieces.
Okay, all right. I'll start with the content of it and what motivates me there. I mean, I'll tell you a little story about my mother. My mother was a preacher. Okay, she always was preaching. You know, she would always lecture me on things that I did wrong. I did a lot of things, you know, not good. But her lectures, I'd rather for her to actually punish me in other ways rather than talk. So please don't talk anymore. And so after over a number of years, I found that many of the things that she said were true. I discovered them for myself. I didn't believe her at the time. And I think I got a little bit of that preachery thing in me. And you can ask my granddaughter. I saw her walking around here somewhere. But I lecture, or I talk about things that are spiritual, or things that are discernible in terms of human nature, people dealing with each other. But the point that I'm trying to make is that my mother used to have a church, and it was a multi-denominational church, which was weird. And there was a lady that lived next door to the church that looked like she was well off to me. She had a nice car. She looked like she had plenty of money. She was up in age. And one day my mother told me to take some food and some clothing to this woman. And I said to myself, this woman don't need anything. She's richer than us, But when I took the things over to her on Christmas Eve, she was so appreciative. And she was actually almost homeless and didn't have any food in the house. And how did my mother know that? The woman didn't look poor. She wasn't African American or Puerto Rican or anything. She just looked like a rich person. And I said to myself, how did she know that? And how does she know all these things about people that's not obvious? And so when you look at that painting, really she's up on higher ground there, so to speak, with her shoes off, and she's looking out for just everyday people, all kinds of people, not just one type of people, but all kinds of people. And she was very discernful and caring, and people loved her. People cared deeply about my mother. And the other thing about my mother, she didn't ask for any accolades or anything from people. She almost resisted it, And so that painting is very special to me because, those people there are going to a fire, and that fire, they're looking at a fire that took place on Monroe Avenue. That's where I took the picture. But it's not the fire, a real fire, so to speak, a physical fire, as it is sort of a holy fire. People are drawn to her, and as they were drawn to her in her ministry, they were purified, so to speak. Okay, so that there's a purification kind of a thing there, and then there's a crossroads, and that crossroads is a place where everybody kind of meets at one point or the other, and they see revelations of themselves. It's like looking in a mirror at their own souls. But she stimulated that kind of a thing. But that's what that painting has a lot to do with. Now, did I expect for people to know about that? No. Matter of fact, I was scared to talk about it. I'm surprised that I'm talking about it now. Okay? Because people, they're a little hesitant about religion. Okay? But that was my way of sneaking it in with the watercolor and the way that, I painted the watercolor on large format pieces of paper on a piece of Homer salt, vertical piece of Homer salt on a pedestal, and I put honey in the water so that the watercolor wouldn't run, because watercolor has a tendency to run all over the place, and so when I mixed the honey in the water and the color, it stayed exactly where I wanted it. So I can go in and be as illustrative and as tight as I wanted to, and get away with it. So that's what that painting was all about, basically.
So I want to continue talking about layers, but I wonder if you would tell me, or tell us, about, there's a particular little painting back there that's kind of in between the layered watercolors and the collages. And it's called Clarissa Street Reject, and it's back there, a vertical piece back there in the corner. And you told me how this painting came to be the other day, and it's a pretty interesting story. Will you talk about that?
All right, I hope none of those people are here from that committee. But Clarissa Street Reject, they came to me and asked me to do some artwork for the Clarissa Street reunion for their T-shirts and for a magazine that they were putting out. And so I did some drawings of John Coltrane, Frederick Douglass, and Dr. Anthony Jordan, who was a doctor back in the 50s, early 50s and 60s. He was a man that did home visits and the poor African American community, went to him for medical situations. So I did the drawing of him, and then the Clarissa Street itself, I had to find some old photographs and use them to paint some of the scenes there on Clarissa Street back in the at least the 50s, if nothing else. And so I guess the committee didn't like my watercolors. They said, well, we don't like the watercolors. I'm not sure if they really said they liked the drawings or not, but it kind of incensed me, and so I just ripped it up, ripped up all of the images I had and put them back together again. And so I reframed it and called it Clarissa Street Reject. But what it is though, technique is something that I acquired when I was a student, undergraduate student at RIT. I got very interested in reflections. We had to produce a thesis after 4 years of college there at RIT at that time. And I had a man that was on my committee by the name of Osmond Guy. Osmond Guy, well, he looked white. He looked, excuse me, I'm Jewish. Slightly built, but he was black, and he would always remind me that he was black. But he took me under his wing, and I started to work with him. He was the chair of my committee, and I told him I was very interested in working with reflections. Reflections from windows, reflections from water, that kind of thing. And my whole thesis was on that. But I never got away from that. And we're talking about well over maybe 55 or 60 years ago. I started that. And it still follows me. And so that's what a great deal of these reflections are all about.
Yeah, and that kind of leads to thinking about the watercolor, the collages, because without knowing your work, people might not realize that you're tearing up and cutting up old watercolor paintings, almost deconstructing your old work to make this new work. And when did you start doing that, or start realizing that you weren't just destroying the work because you got rejected from the show, but you were making new work as a result?
Yeah. Well, as I began to, as I was working, Stanley Whitmire, he used to come to all of my shows, and I really loved that man because he would sit there and he would look at me, and he would look at the work, and he said to me, he said, Luvon, he said, you're good, you're good at what you do. He said, but you're not close enough to it. I said, what in the world does that mean? Here I am working my tail off. Osmond did the same thing to me. What does that mean? That I'm not close enough to my work. And finally, it dawned on me, well after Stan had passed on, that he wanted me to really look closer at what it was that I was doing. And I said, well, the only way that I can really look closely at what I'm doing is to revisit it without thinking about the representationalism, without seeing the content of subject matter of what it was, and begin to look at the form in and of itself. And as I began to tear these watercolors up, I could see the color, I could see the shapes, I could see the texture, I could see abstract forms, and some of my students, when I was working with them, they would say to me, you know, I know you're a figurative painter, but I really think you understand and see what it is that I'm doing as an abstract painter. You know, I believe more in you when you talk about my work than some of the people who are actually abstract painters. And I thought that was interesting. And that made me look closer at line, shape, value, texture, and color, and how it was reproduced and created over and over again. Not only within myself, but see it in other people, you know. And then I realized that in researching and studying Lamar Bearden, he made a statement once about he feels like he's a giant whale traveling down the road, and he just opens up his mouth and swallows everything, you know, and puts it into his work, you know. And somebody said to me once, Clifford one said, "Luvon, you're painting the whole world, you know." And yeah, I'm very interested in a lot of stuff. And people used to say, "Well, that's too busy." Well, you know, it's not too busy if you organize it right, you know. And then the other thing is that I begin to think about multi-layers of things that's going on around us. You know, what's going on in the newspaper, what's going on television, what's going on in terms of chance meeting with people and stuff like that. And all of that is flooding through my work, flowing through my work. It's a spiritual element, there's an emotional element, there's a relationship kind of a thing, as well as the physicality thing that I'm always aware of.
The physicality things too, like where it started to evolve, and it's not just your watercolor paintings that you cut up and put back together, but speaking about reflections, you've got mylar in there, and this piece that I'm sitting next to now, there's these cracks and chunks of paint that sort of hold everything together. This is one of my favorite pieces here. The Memorial Art Gallery director came by, or the curator came by the other day, and she was looking at this piece, and she said, "Did you know, not only is Luvon's portrait in there, but behind him is one of his paintings, and that painting is in our collection." And she recognized it. And I hadn't seen that before, but what I liked about this piece especially is that it's not just the torn up watercolors. There's photography, there's magazine clippings, there's mylar, there's what looks to be other kinds of paint, and then this just raw material that you've let speak for itself.
Yeah, that wheel is pretty good, isn't it? He's eating everything, you know, but yeah, I'm just, when I walk into that studio, I'm just like aware of everything, you know. And, you know, I mean, you know, it's a wonder my wife hasn't kicked me out, you know, I mean, because I'm wasting money. I mean, that's, you know, that's, the studio is burning up a lot of cash. So when I go in there, I have to really do some serious thinking, you know, and I'm very fortunate that she's as good as she is about supporting me. And so when I go in there, it's, you know, I'm very serious about what I'm doing. And I'm looking at everything, you know, and I'm not looking at, you know, pretty iconography or, you know, something that's pleasurable. I'm really investigating, you know.
Well, I think that comes across. I mean, I can see why some people might call it busy, but I feel like there's a lot of restraint in these collages. You've included a lot, but you've also defined it in a really careful and thoughtful way, which is one of the reasons I love these collages. I want to take a pause just for a minute and open the floor. If anyone has a question for Luvon, if you have something on your mind that you'd like to ask him, we'd love for you to participate. If not, I've got a whole list of other questions here. Keep going. Anybody have a question they want to ask Luvon right now?
They're scared.
The room is quiet.
When I mentioned that religious thing, they got all there and freaked out.
Everyone's like, I thought I knew Luvon.
I want to know something.
Okay.
What do you want to be when you grow up?
I want to be just like you, Jerry. Well, yeah. I want to be more aware, Psalms 19, it says, the heavens declare the glory of God, night unto night, day unto day, reveal his knowledge. So every day is a new day. Every day I see something that I didn't see before, and I just get a deeper zest and hunger for that kind of thing, So yeah, growing up was wonderful.
Yeah, food.
So growing up, your first few years painting, your first few years as an artist, where did you draw your inspiration? I know in your household you had a great deal of religious influence. So did that inspire your earlier works, or was there something else that you drew inspiration from?
Yeah, that religious thing has been with me since I was a child. Those clouds, my parents left me with my grandparents. So my mother was gone and my father was in World War I. So they both were gone. They're very loving people. So I missed them. And so I used to go out and look at the clouds, and I don't know. Now you're gonna get rid of me. I know for sure. There's sort of a vibration in the clouds, and I felt comfort from looking at the clouds and looking at the light, and that's still with me. Just like a reflection from my undergraduate work. These things stay with you, and so, I don't know what it is, but I enjoy searching it and looking at it, and the rainbow in the clouds and things like that still turns me on. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you look at the piece called Rochester 1940, it's on the other side of that wall over there. It's hanging by itself. It's a picture of downtown Rochester, Main Street, and you call it 1940 because of your birth year, but if you look in the clouds, and maybe I'm reading into it, but I see some outlines of horses in the clouds as well.
Yeah.
So I'm right, okay. Nice to kill Can we talk just for a second? I know we can talk about this all night, but I just want to talk for a second about the All of Us workshop. And because I've heard it over and over again that you created this out of nothing, that people from all walks of life came there, and it was a space that ignited so much collaboration, and you continue to do that now. It's like you're addicted to it. You can't stop it. You carry it with you.
Yeah, it was a job that was unfinished, it's still yet to be finished. But I was hired, when I first graduated from RIT with the MST program, in the MST program, I thought I was going to be a high school teacher, and I was turned down for the one job there that they had at Madison High School. And I would have turned me down too, because I did not look like a teacher. I looked like a hippie or something, something out of space, and I wouldn't have hired me either. But the guy wouldn't hire me, and he was a black principal from Texas, and he said to me, I'm not gonna hire you. He said, I got this other guy in mind that's a sculptor from Texas. And so I'm sorry, but I'm not going to hire you. And that really depressed me. But shortly after that, about a week later, somebody called me from the Memorial Art Gallery and invited me to come there and apply for this position. Well, they just hired me right on the spot. It wasn't, at that time, it wasn't a search committee or anything of that nature. They just hired me on the spot, and they had known about some of the things that I was doing in the community, or, you know, I used to work with the local arts council, which was handled by one person, Pat Weil, and me and Pat used to do all kinds of things in the community, and I guess Memorial Art Gallery knew about that maybe, and so they hired me right on the spot as coordinator of neighborhood services, without really telling me exactly what the job entailed. You know, all that they wanted to do was to bring more underprivileged people, African American people, the Hispanic community into the gallery. And then to have things come out of the gallery that would go into the community to stimulate the community. And so I did some research on my own about art in the communities, and the Caribou House in Cleveland, Ohio, came to my mind. And I don't know where that came from. I was talking with different people, but the Caribou House was like a settlement house that had turned into an art cultural center. And you know, they had the visual arts and the performing arts all mixed together. And you know, they were doing a really good job. There was a lot of some movie stars came out of that, and so there was a good history there about that. And I went there and visited the place and studied it. Came back to Buffalo, looked at what they were doing in the community, and then when I came back to the Memorial Art Gallery and started to think about it, I said, well, you know, they have a much larger art community in those areas than we did here at that time. So the little art community that we had, rather than choosing just the African American community or the Hispanic community, I decided to mix everybody, you know, because I had just come out of RIT. I knew that RIT had some discipline that we would never be able to acquire in the community unless we linked it into RIT. And so, and then there was a lot of people like myself. You know, I might have not had a job if it hadn't been for Harris K. Pryor, you know, taking a notice of me. But there was a lot of other young artists who were out there who didn't have jobs. And so I decided that if I got those people to teach classes that they knew of, and also get people from other places like the Visual Studies workshops and Nazareth College, and bring those people in, we'll get a nice cross-fertilization of different types of people working in the community with both the African American community and the Hispanic community, as well as any other indigenous part of the community. And so once we thought about it, and I got a group of people together. Well, actually, I didn't even really. I did stimulate them, and but a lot of other people joined in with me. Tony Petrarca and many other people. We got together and we started having little happenings on street corners, in front of the gallery, down at the library. We did different things, and then we had shows at different places, and we began to build sort of a reputation, you know, and we got a lot of notice in the newspapers and that kind of thing. And I sat down and talked to the director and the educational director at that time, and talked to them about what about having a facility, having a place that's outside of the gallery where people could come and get some impromptu training and just began to meet and greet each other, you know, as they felt needed. If we had special kinds of equipment and materials that was accessible. So I had worked for the recreation department, the city recreation department, for many years while I was an undergraduate. So I took that experience and I knew about, there was some playgrounds or some clubhouses that were vacant, like the old, police station there on University Avenue. I knew that was vacant. And, so I spoke to Harris K. Pryor and some other people, and they went and talked to the city, and we were able to get that building, and we moved that group into that building, and we put a call out for people coming and taking classes for about $30 for 8 weeks of classes, and it caught on, and it lasted for about 10 years. So that's where all of us came from.
And before I ask my next question, I just want to throw it out there if anybody's got something they want to ask Luvon. You sort of continue that tradition now, because you go by Joy Gallery on Saturday, as of late, there's all kinds of people in there coming in and out, painting watercolors, sometimes formal instruction, sometimes they're working on their own stuff. Other times you're just talking about art and art history and inspiration. Do you think it's got the same, I mean, obviously it does have the same vibe.
I think so. I mean, you know, anytime you get a bunch of people together and they're very serious about art, you know, making art especially, and discussing art topics. And anytime you get a bunch of artists around, hanging out together, there's something that's very magnetic about that group of people. You know, even if you just got two people, and they're discussing art and talking about art, pretty soon other people start joining in, you know? And there's something infectious about that. Artists are natural born teachers. They're natural humanists, you know, and once you get a number of people together that's really caring about art, you know, there's this magnetism, you know. But not only that, what I find there at the Joy Gallery is that people drop in and they start talking and hanging out, and I realized, and my wife is caught on to this as well. You know, she has a boutique next door, but she sits there with the group with me now, and the more we talk and the more we coexist with each other and share with each other, the more we seem to understand and learn, you know, on a very expansive level. I mean, some of it is just intellectual kinds of things, pursuits, but some of it is just sharing. We share food with each other, we share our thoughts with each other, and when we leave there, we're just energized. You know, it's a very strange thing, but it started with all of us. You know, and it's a very infectious thing.
So I just want to reiterate, make sure I was right, so I'm not inviting people to Joy without your permission. But Joy Gallery is going to be open on Saturdays during the run of this show, except for Thanksgiving weekend. And you invite them to come by because you've got quite a bit more of your work there on display, right?
Yeah. And when you come, just come and don't have any expectations. Don't come there and say, well, I'm going to teach you watercolor. I'm going to teach you how to get his stick, you know. You know, it's not that, you know. I mean, it's a lot more than that, you know.
I have a question about your, the wooden sculpture that has all the handles on it kind of thing. Sculptures like that, do you go and seek all the parts and then build it? Or does it evolve as you start working it and you, I'll put this there, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know that. The latter part of what you're saying is what it evolves. You know, and the funniest thing, I said to myself with those handles, I said, Luvon, you gotta get a handle on this thing. This is get out there, you gotta control this. And then the handles became important. And I said, well, how can these handles become something? And then there was some driftwood hanging around, and I took that and I laid it up next to something else, and the thing just keeps opening up. Fred Myers, who used to be the graduate painting teacher there at RIT. He said after a point, creatively you reach a continuum. And I didn't understand that. That was a little bit beyond me. Right, Glenn? Okay, so that continuum that he's talking about, I think I got a little taste of it. I haven't really gotten it. I don't really quite understand it. But I know that once you, Robert Motherwell says, you put down a mark and it calls for another mark, or it calls for something else. Okay? So that's the way it works with me. If I see something and then I see something next to it, it automatically starts to take me into something.
Thank you for asking that. I forgot to ask about the sculpture. Yeah, can you?
Hi, I wanted to ask, I've noticed in a lot of your work from 2016 up, you've worked a lot with the side profile, the silhouette of the face. And I was looking at your work, you mentioned it earlier, the 1940 piece. In the corner, there's also a silhouette there, and that piece is from 2003. So I was curious about how this reoccurring symbol, what significance it has for you and how it's permeated through your work.
Okay, I found that the silhouettes used to be used for portraits, to get accuracy of features and so on and so forth, that back in the 1400s or something like that, that was considered to be used mostly for portraits, okay, because you can get a lot of detailing. But so that's one thing. I realized that the graphic appeal, the flatness, okay, the two-dimensional element, okay, you shouldn't have did that. The two-dimensional element gets your attention like that, okay? The illusion of space, the atmospheric perspective, you can just dream on and on and on, but that flat plane checks you, it structures you. So the structure and the unstructured is what I'm really trying to deal with, okay? And but the other thing with those silhouettes is that makes reference to genealogy, my genealogy especially, I use my children's profile as well as my profile, but also it's my grandparents' profiles too. Okay, and again, when I look in the Bible, the thing that's the most mysterious to me is the genealogy. I never can understand exactly what that is, and I know it's important, and the lineage, one thing moving from one thing to another thing, and it's not always vertical or horizontal or diagonal. And most of the time, it's more of a spiral kind of a thing. Okay, so that's a great deal of what I'm dealing with these cutout shapes. Okay.
All right, any more questions? Yeah?
Just getting back to the All of Us workshop. I was a photographer when I was with Eastman Kodak, and I met Luvon during those days, and he convinced me to come over to the workshop and teach some photography. And I never considered myself a teacher, but he leaned on me and convinced me to come, and I surprised myself. I just start spitting out this information that surprised me. So as a result of that, I've been teaching at Academy of Art classes in California for a while, thanks to Luvon and the All of Us workshop.
That's a great thing.
This is one of his students. Small world. But that's all of us, you know? I mean, it's like, I'm just one spoke in the wheel. But there are other people, Eddie Davis, the late Eddie Davis, very important person. But there were many, really good people, you know? Yeah, that all of us was spectacular. Steve Hill, he taught. He was my student, but he teaches too, you know?
All right, time for one more, maybe? One more question? All right, come on.
Luvon, it's lovely that you can look back and you have this incredible success, and it seems like when you look back, you can see how this all unfolded. But when you were young, what sustained you through those more difficult times? Was there a faith or that belief in other people, or was it your grandparents? What kept you going? I mean, you just keep going and going, and now you're in this really sweet spot where you can look back and say, yeah, I did it. How did you get there? How did you sustain that? How did you keep going forward?
You know, again, I used to have something called Soul Lens at the Memorial Art Gallery, and there was a lady who would make barbecue chicken, a church that would sell barbecue chicken. That was a way to get people in there that didn't like art really. And then we'd have Garth Fagan come in with the bottom of the bucket, but now it's Garth Fagan dance. Eddie Davis would do a demonstration on the potter's wheel, and I think and it would last from 12 o'clock right up to about 11 or 12 o'clock at night. Or it's supposed to be 9 o'clock. And it was really a very popular activity at the Memorial Art Gallery. But I was sitting there once, and it came to me that Luvon, this is really pretty good. This is wonderful. But it's not. It's not. You didn't do this. There's something else going on here. Okay, and that's when I became aware that there's some, my mother, all that preaching, I realized that there's a God somewhere, there's somebody out there that's watching over everything. So from that point on, I knew. But I was the biggest sinner you ever saw in your life. I was dog mad, Okay, but I had enough sense to realize that wasn't me.
All right, last chance. So, okay, one more over here.
I'm just wondering how many people in this room have been influenced so heavily who have been educated by Luvon?
When I walk in the door, yeah. Raise your hand if you, I expect it to be the whole room. Right? So I want to ask you one last question. There's no other questions here. And that's, you hear a cliche a lot from teachers, and they say, I learn more from my students than I teach them. And you even say that a lot. So you tell me what does that mean to you? Because I know it's true.
Yeah, I do. I learn a lot more. I learn a lot from the students. I learn a great deal from them. I told one student today, the greater you are, the better you become. Right, John Ritalik? The better you become, the better I will be. If you become great, I will become somebody. Okay? And I see it. you know, okay? And I worry about, you know, what I'm gonna eat the next day, when I'm gonna get the job that I need to keep things going. But beyond that, those students, they're gonna go much, they should go much higher. You know, and if they don't, then you're doing something wrong. You know, so they should be successful. And if they're not successful, then, you know, they can give you all kinds of accolades, but you really didn't do the job. You know, if you're doing the right job, and they're learning and they're growing, you know, and you see that in your children too. If you're fortunate enough to have children, if you do a good job, it'll come back and visit you. There'll be a lot of hard stuff there too. Okay. So that good stuff will come back and you'll just be elated. You know, and I sit and listen to John Rotale. He talks about the students, somebody that's in Los Angeles, that's doing remarkable work. Somebody that's in Paris, that's a fashion photographer, that's well known. You know, when he starts to talk about that, he just starts puffing up. You know, it makes you feel good, and you're encouraged, and you're learning.
Well, I think that this room full of people is evidence that you did it right. You did it right. Luvon, thank you so much for spending some time with us tonight. I can't thank you enough.
I knew I would love it.
Thank you all for coming.